Jerry.
You're welcome.
All right. Welcome to the January 26, 2023 meeting of the Half Moon Bay Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. As we always do, we'll start off with actually before roll call, I wanted to make sure that we just acknowledged what happened in our community earlier this week. And I know there's going to be a lot of, there already have been public events, and some are planned for tomorrow and next week. But I just thought maybe before we do anything, it's not on the agenda, but we just take a moment of silence just to recognize the victims and their families, and certainly what our community is going through. Challenging times, never expect for something like this to happen in our hometown. So maybe just, whatever your belief system is, just, a moment of quiet reflection, and then we'll get the meeting started. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the accommodation. So with that, let's do the roll call, please.
Okay. Committee member Foldenauer?
Here.
Committee member Olson?
Here.
Committee member Ray Dupree?
Here.
Committee member Schiller? He's here. I see him.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the mute.
That's all right. Committee member Standez? Which I think no. Vice Chair White?
Here.
And Chair Rendon?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda is to review the agenda. And so this was emailed out and hopefully you had a chance to review it. Any questions, comments, or requests for changes? All right, seeing none, we will proceed with the agenda as presented. Our next item is to acknowledge the minutes from our November 3rd, 2022 meeting. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review any changes, edits to the minutes as emailed out. All right, seeing none, and I think basically we just acknowledge that the minutes were received and reviewed, if the committee's okay with that. All right, then moving on to our agenda. So public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public that might be tuning in to share comments on any item that is not already listed on the agenda. And Sherry, I'll ask you to see if there's any public comment.
Sorry, I have two attendees, Stacy and Bhavana. I have one who is raising her hand. I'll just go ahead and allow Stacy.
Hi.
Hi.
I was not able to locate the mute button. Thank you for that. I'm Bhavana. I don't know if you can see me, but anyway, I did not get a chance to see the agenda for today's meeting because this was a last minute meeting link that was put up by Jack on Nextdoor, and I was surprised that there was a bicycle committee and very excited to be here. Is there a link to where this committee agenda is for today's meeting so I can take a look before I start jabbering on it?
Yeah, why don't I take Stacy and then I can put it in. Well, I don't know if you can see the chat, but I'll put it in the chat.
Sounds good, thank you.
In the meantime, I'll bring up Stacy. She's got her hand raised.
Terrific, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Stacy McCarthy, and I'm here from Coastside Families Taking Action. We're a group of about 240 families here on the coast side, taking a look at how to create a more sustainable, equitable coastside for all families here on the coastside. And it's come to our attention, especially in light of recent events, that One of the ways that our farm workers are able to get around is via bike. And there's been a big push in our community to donate bikes, and many of us have, and there's a great organization that's making those available to our farm workers. Many of those folks live south of town, and our trail ends at Cameron's, which means that they then have to be on the freeway, the highway, Highway 1, and it's incredibly treacherous and dangerous. We really want to see that trail extended, and we bring this to this committee in hopes that you could advance that idea as well. So thank you for your work and for your time.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate the comments. And I'll encourage you to keep tuning in because while we can't specifically talk about what you mentioned because it's not on the agenda, we have talked a lot, since the committee's existence about extending trails and so forth, north and south. So please continue to tune in. So with that, not seeing any more public comment. We'll move on to
I'm going to go back.
Sorry, this is Bhavana here again.
Okay.
Sorry, I did see the agenda. I'm not able to reply to the chat because it says chat is disabled, but I'm going to just talk a little. I have a couple of things I would like to bring up that's not on the agenda. I think the agenda items, if I'm reading correctly, are administrative items, trail signage, and storm updates, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do I talk now or do I talk later? Do I bring up my stuff now or later?
Yeah,
now?
so if you'd like to make a comment on any item that's not on the agenda, now's the time to bring it up. Otherwise, if you have comments on the items listed, we'll open it up for comments when we discuss those items.
Okay, so when you're talking about, when you say storm updates, are you going to talk about the new trails flooding situation or not? That was not on your agenda at all. Okay, so a couple of things.
The storm updates are going to be in relation to what how the storm has impacted our bikes and trails and walking paths. That's what that item is about. So if your comments related to that, I would wait till that item 3C.
Okay, so that's one part of that. A couple of things that I did want to bring up in this meeting was the first item is the new eastbound trail that runs from Miramar to Coronado Avenue in El Granada has not only flooding situation because of drainage problems, but also the sidewalk that exits out at Coronado Avenue is not designed properly, in my opinion. I rode the trail a couple of weeks or a month ago when the paving was done, and while they're exiting out of the trail at Coronado, there is no shoulder on Coronado Avenue to turn on to, like, for people turning onto Coronado Avenue. When you dismount, you have to dismount your bike. And since there is no shoulder, I was almost hit by a car that was turning right onto Coronado from Highway 1, because that light is a green light most of the time. And even if it was a red light, people really don't stop. And if they do stop, they're not looking at people exiting the trail. The sidewalk does extend a little bit further to the right, but it does not go all the way to Avenue Alhambra. It would have been nice if they did extend that trail onto Alhambra and provide a safer exit for cyclists or even people walking. Pedestrians who are crossing Highway 1, there is a crosswalk there, that's fine, but people who are turning onto Coronado Avenue, it's not safe for those people. That's one. The second one was I was wondering if it was possible to have like a safer bike lane between Kelly Avenue and Main Street on Highway 1. It'd be nice if they had that green striped lane that goes across along Highway 1 near the fire station. But it would be nice if they had that also between Kelly and Main Avenue on Highway 1, because for people riding on Highway 1 between Kelly and Main, those people are exiting onto Highway 92 to get onto Highway 92 or getting onto Main Street or even turning onto those establishments, the businesses that are located in the Strawflower, as well as on the southbound, as well as the northbound where the New Lift Market is. So people are not really paying attention. There is no safe way for people cyclists to get off one and continue straight onto one, get off that exit lane. Right now, I'm kind of like waving my hand, and people. I have had cars honking at me because, hey, what you doing, sort of deal. But I don't know if there's a better way to do this. My suggestion was to have a green lane there, and I did submit a Caltrans request back in September of 2022, and I got a response from them. The response was, there is a project in the works for Route 1 in Half Moon Bay, and the area in question will be investigated for the possibility of adding bicycle improvement. However, the project won't be ready to go until at least the next fiscal year, and there are no guarantees as to what, if any, bicycle improvements will be incorporated. So it would be nice if they actually think about, us also as a community who's using these roadways instead of just designing roadways for cars. So that's the second one. The third one was, there are bumps in that northbound lane between Miramontes Point Road and Ocean Colony, right? I don't know if people have already brought this up or not. I think that's mostly because of the tree trunks or whatever, tree roots or whatever. But yeah, it'd be nice if they could, shave that off. I know they shaved some of those bumps on the coastal trail, and they fixed that. It'd be nice if they could shave this off also. Right now, I kind of like get on the car lane and just get off the bike lane and get on the shoulder. Sorry, there's not a bike lane. We'll call it a shoulder. So if we could address that. The third one is, or the fourth one, I guess, the RV park at Surfers Beach here near Pillar Point. Sorry, is that too many? Do you want to?
I'm sorry. We should have said it's usually I think it's a 3-minute time.
Okay, sorry. Comment. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna. Okay.
But I will add that as I mentioned to Stacy, please continue to tune in, because many of the issues that you have raised, we have discussed in the past, and we will continue to discuss. But because they're not on tonight's agenda, we just simply can't.
Sure. No problem. All right. Thank you for listening. All right.
No, but thank you for attending. We appreciate the feedback.
Through the chair, if you'd like, I can just provide some status on some of the items that was brought up. I know we can't have a long conversation, but I can just share from the staff perspective. Thank you for those comments, Stacy. So for and Bhavna, for the most part, the Caltrans project is looking at bike and pedestrian improvements on Highway 1 from Moss Beach down to Wavecrest. So we are certainly in the process of that. I understand that they didn't promise anything to you. That's pretty general comment that they will throw back. But I'm working with Caltrans directly to incorporate those. That's something that this committee has brought up in the past about creating that connection, especially along Highway 1 between Kelly and Main Street, at least 92, and then obviously up to Main Street. So that is something that we're going to continue working on. And when we get an updated set of plans, I'll bring it back to this group for additional review, comments, and discussion. We're still waiting for that 65% design, but should be in the next few months. So hopefully this year, in the next few months, we'll get a chance to look at it in this group. I will just also mention on the shoulder issue, we've actually put a request into Caltrans to repair that. They do need to go in and cut those tree roots and redo the paving. It's pretty awful, and I've made a couple of requests. So I will also I'll reach out again and see if it's been on the list yet and whether they have a timeline on it. And then the last thing I'll just comment on is the trail from going south to Moonridge. So we have a project in our capital improvement program. It's unfunded at the moment, but we are seeking funding to do a design and construction of a trail that will go from Higgins Canyon Road down to Miramontes Point Road. It's something that's on our list. It's been on the list for a number of years, and we are just continuing to push for funding. And I think sooner than later, we'll start that project up as well.
Great. Thank you, Maz. Appreciate that.
We have one more public speaker, it looks like.
Okay, I'm allowing Pete Cernica.
Hi. I am joining a bit late, so I'm not sure if this was mentioned already, but I'm interested in hearing about the possibility of doing something to improve the biking conditions between Cameron's and Holy Family Childcare. Did Stacy mention that already? Yeah, so we take our kids on the bike often. We just have one car, so being able to ride our kids to daycare is kind of important to us. To me, I'm not an expert in this, obviously, but something even simple like one of those plastic traffic things, just to remind people, not to veer into the shoulder, would be great, and it would be a lot safer. So I just wanted to share that.
Great. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate you joining tonight.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other public comment? All right. Seeing none, then we will move on with the agenda. So Roman numeral 3, topic A, administrative items. So the election of chair and the vice chair. So I think the way that we've typically handled this is we've opened the floor for nominations for chair, and then we open up the floor for nominations for vice chair. And so let's start with chair. Anybody who would like to nominate somebody for chair, or somebody who feel free to self-nominate if you're interested in serving as chair, that is perfectly acceptable too. So with that, I will turn it over to the committee.
If I may add through the chair, I know that there's been some conversations about kind of process. Typically, what we have done in the past, look at the vice to move into the chair seat. So if that's something that we want to do, it's something certainly that is available. But anybody that's interested can raise their hand. That you can, yeah, and as Mario said, you can absolutely self-nominate. So.
Well, being the vice chair, I'm happy to do it. But if there's somebody hell bent in here, I'm not going to fight you for that. So feel free to speak up, but I'm happy to fill that role. Mario's been doing it for, I think, 3 years now, which we're really grateful for. And I think to ask for another year would be, I think he needs a break.
Well, if Brandon is self-nominating, I will second that motion.
That was a slow pitch there for you, man.
Okay.
Any other committee members that are interested in serving as chair? All right, then seeing none, we have a motion and a second for Brandon as our chair. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then I think the motion carries, and Brandon, you are our chair. And so,
yay! Congratulations.
Like at this moment, that's what I asked Maz earlier. I was like, does it happen like at this moment? Like, yeah. Thank
yes.
you. And thanks, Mario, for all your hard work. You really did step up when this committee had some new members like myself, and added some structure and some great leadership so that we could learn from how you run this whole program. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. And so Brandon, if I had a gavel, I'd pass it over to you. So I'll hand you the virtual gavel.
Well, I think now we need to have a vice chairman. Should I nominate Mario for that? No, I'm kidding. So somebody else has to step up today. And if you would like to do that, then I'll leave it open to the floor. Do we have any volunteers? I'm okay with awkward silence, so we could sit here for 5 minutes, but do we have any volunteers that like to raise their hand?
We're going to pick names out of a hat.
It's not hard. I generally make all the meetings. And
Actually, that's true. Through the chair, if I may add, yeah. So the role of the vice chair is basically, in case of Brandon's absence, you would be chairing the meeting for that particular time. And it's just good for us to have a backup. And as Brandon said, he's been pretty much, I think your attendance has been pretty much 100%. So I can't think of a meeting you've missed. So yeah,
I think I missed one meeting because I totally spaced, but totally my fault. But no, and that's the vice chair. There's no like fiduciary thing that you have to do other than if I didn't make it. And to be honest, it's pretty straightforward. And if I were to say anything, Maz will nudge you along with Sherry and everybody else along the way if you need some help. Not to mention you have Mario here who has a lot of experience.
Okay, this is Janet. I'll self-nominate.
Well, I will second Janet. So with that, we can take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Janet, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, we are going to return to in-person meetings. Maz, do you just want to comment? We're returning in March, I think, to our first in-person meeting well, I've never seen anybody in person. Maybe I passed you on the road, but we're returning in March. Is that right, Maz?
That's correct. So it's we've been following the lead of our city council. Essentially, the COVID emergency order in the state of California is going to be lifted at the end of February. And so what that means is for Zoom meetings will no longer be allowed under the Brown Act. So we will need to be back in person. We are still looking at how that looks. We're hoping to keep a hybrid component so that at least folks can still participate and watch on Zoom and call in remotely. And so there'll be more information. We were supposed to have some mock meetings for city council to see how the setup is and how the operation is. But given it was actually later this week, but given Monday's events, that's been postponed a little bit. So I'll have more information in the next month or so. We'll definitely have it ready to go. But yeah, I would say you can safely assume the March meeting will be in person, and more information on that will be available well in advance of that meeting.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing everyone in person. I think it'll be good energy in the room after a long time. Next on the agenda item this evening is trail signage. We were going to get an update. We've talked about this many meetings. And Maz, is that you or Jonathan going to give an update on the signage, or somebody else here?
Actually, I'm going to introduce Matt Nichols, who, as of, I guess today, is our permanent management analyst within Public Works.
Well, welcome to the club.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
I will turn it over to Matt. He's going to run this presentation.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Let me pull up the slides real quick. Can everybody see this okay?
Yep.
Great. So this, I believe, stemmed from some earlier conversations originally around e-bikes. And it seemed out of those conversations that kind of diverged to general trail etiquette. And so if I can get the slides to go, there we are. Tonight will mostly just be an update and getting some input on the signage that we're potentially looking at, and kind of steering away from anything like ordinances or e-bike specific language. And with that, here's a few examples of signage in the city as well as other cities, kind of going over Half Moon Bay's visuals, trying to keep in line with what we already have, as well as with some of the wording and visuals that other cities and towns are using for their trail signage and trail etiquette. Some of the common themes with this being that you want to keep it visually pleasing, but also simple, so that you can see it while you're riding or walking by. Here's the potential verbiage that we're looking at for the sign. But again, this is all just easily changeable things. We wanted to keep things short, but quickly understandable. And then here's the drafts that we currently have, and looking at this more from a visual design element. So we can easily, if the verbiage does need to be changed, we can easily do that. And then also all these design elements can be mixed and matched based on preferences. And then so the next steps after we kind of move on with the design cues for the signs, how we want that to look, and the wording we want to use for that. The next steps would be to draft an ordinance, which we'd hope to get done by April, and then we would present that to council in May, and then continue our work with state parks when it comes to coordinating for that, as well as implementing safety improvements. Any questions or comments?
I have a question as it relates. We had talked about in past meetings about speed limit signs. Is that included in this conversation, or is that a separate thing?
Yeah. So originally when coming up with it, I did include speed limits, but as I worked on it a little bit more, I realized that because we haven't done an ordinance yet and wanted to keep those two things separate, I left it out. But that is something that later on, after we adopt an ordinance, we could either put that on this sign or that could be put onto other signs. That's also why, I'll go back real quick, why it's pretty general in terms of e-bikes and electric skateboards and scooters, not going to classes of that, just because I wanted to try and separate the trail etiquette from ordinances.
I appreciate that. That's a good idea. The only other comment, and then we'll open up to whoever else might have any, is that font's small, and it's going, I know that these things are all very important points, bullet points, but if you pick the top three and made it 42-point font, because just all the, I mean, that you see the signs in the state parks, I'm using the state parks as an example because they do have them that adjoin our trails, and it's just like nobody pays attention to the, because they just can't read it, especially if you're on a bike. If you're walking, maybe, but that would really be my only other comment. Are there any thoughts around that?
I would agree on that. This is Janet. I know that when people are enjoying the trail, they don't stop to read the signs. I like the yield part that helps people to understand that bicycles need to yield to pedestrians and that sort of thing. But we really do need to focus the message very sharply, very tightly, and increase the font size and make sure that people understand we need to share the trail, and we need to announce that, blaze that, and perhaps even put it on the pavement, share the trail, because people don't understand it's not just about them. Thanks.
Any other comments from the committee members?
Just that I agree with all those comments. Definitely, it's going to be hard to read, especially on a bicycle, and the fonts need to be larger for sure. And less is more.
Sorry, Matt, for the.
No, I totally, that's a great point. In that case, could I get some input on which points you think would be the best ones to go with?
While we're thinking about this, I also wonder, you did a really good job with that graphic. It jumps out, like you don't have to read that graphic. And humans consume pictures before they consume text. So if we do get to maybe some suggestions, if we could actually just create a graphic, like I'm almost thinking not as much text and more graphic. If you had a picture on the bottom with the person with the dog leash, and you had an arrow that said 6 feet, that's going to instantly tell someone, at least convey something. So I throw that out there. Do any committee members have any ideas about which top few they would be?
Do not block the trail. That's important. Keep to the right unless passing. That's also important. And you could just say, announce yourself instead of when passing or going around corners. Just announce yourself. I tend to ring the bell on my bike as I approach anything I consider a blind curve or corner, just to let people know, here I come, I'm here. I even ring the bell to announce to the bunnies because the bunnies like to cut across the trail very suddenly. I don't want to hit a bunny.
I would add, at least where I live in front of Alsace-Lorraine neighborhood here, basically from Poplar to Kelly Beach, a lot of people have apparently really long leashes. And the danger in that is a bike goes through there, you can't see it. So I think maybe you don't need to write that, but if you created that graphic at the bottom, that might do that. It's just people are just oblivious that, you know, that dog comes across and it's just going to be dangerous. Any other comments from committee members?
Well, I guess I would just add, I think like half these rules are subjective, not objective. Announce like the maintain safe speed and distance is fairly subjective. What is a safe speed? What is a safe distance? Be aware of your surroundings. Not exactly rules. I don't know who's choosing to put these points on, but I certainly think in terms of less is more, the objective points stand out as more important than the subjective ones.
I think that's a good point. I could see a very interesting debate happening on the coastal trail about what is safe and things. So,
well, and I guess if we're going to be posting the speed, once that's determined, then we really, maybe that's enough for maintaining speed and distance.
Yeah, I agree.
I would just add for the for like a speed limit, that might be a separate sign. It may not have to be on the etiquette sign. Sorry, I can't speak today. We may want to have that as more of a reminder along the trail and not just at the etiquette signs.
I would agree. I was assuming that the speed limit would be separate, but maybe we shouldn't assume anything. Is that the approach that staff is looking at?
That's what we were thinking. And I think I've heard from folks about having the speed limit on thermoplastic on the surface. I've heard that from this committee in the past, or even having it on, something that's more aesthetic and lower in height, closer to the edge of the trail. Those are some of the comments we've heard. And then another thing to think about is, that yield sign. I think it's great for the etiquette image, but we can also utilize that along the coastal trail in other segments as well. So that's another idea. We can actually put that as its own sign, as well as incorporate it into this larger format.
I love that idea. That sign says it all. I think, isn't there one of those down there at Poplar at the end of the trail right now?
You're right. I think you're right.
I think
one.
Go ahead.
One last thing to consider is, and I don't know how this would be done because it's just one more item to put on very small font signs. Turn off your noise canceling so that you can actually hear somebody approaching you. So, either no headphones or turn off your noise canceling. Be aware. I know that there's a be aware of your surroundings, but people don't think about the fact that their noise canceling on their headphones make it impossible for them to hear when I've rung my bell and announced myself and told them what my intentions are. And I've been yelled at passing people at 10 miles per hour because they were startled, even though I've announced myself. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out there.
Thank you.
Any other comments or feedback?
I guess, do we need the e-bikes, electric skateboards, and scooters okay? Do we need that there?
I mean, that everything's okay now from what our last discussions that I understood, that at least the way that I came away from it, unless the city council, changed it. But I think that's a good point. Like there's nothing other than, there's nothing not allowed. Am I right? in saying that?
As far as electric mobility, you're correct. And it was because the conversation was more about speed based than it was the device type itself. Obviously, gas powered is different. That's not allowed, but that is not something that is up for debate either at this point.
I think it's maybe we just say human power e-bikes only or something. I think what I take away from this, Matt, is maybe we think about some shorten them, make the font bigger, and maybe take some out. That I think Eric's idea was good. It sounds like committee members agree that, objective things are going to be better than subjective because that's just human nature. So I know these aren't final. We're grateful for you coming up with this. And I will acknowledge from a guy who designs UI for software sometimes, first contact always hurts. First contact with anything always hurts, but I think this is a really great start, and they do look good. I like the colors, and they look high end for here in Half Moon Bay. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Are we gonna let public comment for that, or is it?
I don't know. Do we do that?
Yes, you can absolutely allow for public comment if you're done with it. There's no, because we've heard the direction, but if you want to still talk after public comment, you can certainly do that as well, Chair.
Okay, well, if there's anybody from the public that'd like to comment on this, we're happy to take any feedback or comments this time.
I don't see. Oh, okay, Bhavna. I'm gonna go ahead and put Bhavna on.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for. Okay, I like the graphic on the first one, but I do agree with a couple of people who mentioned that it's a lot of wording. You don't want to be reading too much when you're riding your bike or walking on the trail. So to that point, the first item, keep to the right unless passing. I would kind of rephrase that to keep to the left, keep to the right, pass on the left. Instead of saying unless passing. Yeah, don't block the trail. That makes sense. Maintain a safe speed. Yeah, safe speed and distance. That is correct. You probably want to post that somewhere else. The speed limit and all that. You don't want to bring that here. Electric. Yeah, the last line. Maybe instead of okay, you want to say aloud. Okay kind of looks weird visually speaking. That's just me. But overall, that looks good. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Is there anyone else we have, Sherry?
No, Stacy does not have her hand raised. So I think she's okay.
Roger
That's
that.
it.
Any other committee members have anything else? All right. Well, thanks for that, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And next up is storm updates. Maz, is that you giving that tonight?
Yes, give me a second to get this slideshow going.
I experienced some storm updates on Higgins today.
Oh.
There's several barriers. That's not in town limits for those listening, so we're not going to talk about that, but it's all yours, Maz.
Thank you. Sorry, I got it ready. Let me make sure you guys
I was just buying time.
I appreciate it. All right, can everybody see?
Yes.
Oh, this is going to be weird. Okay, we'll go with it. All right, so thank you all for tonight. Maz Bilgerginia, Interim Public Works Director, City Engineer with Half Moon Bay. I'm just going to be providing a assessment of some of the storm damage that we've seen related mostly to our trails and walking paths and bike lanes and the coastal trail. But I also have a quick update just on 92 because I think it's important for this for us in general. So we'll do that. All right. So we ended up seeing quite a bit of rainfall this last New Year's Eve. So it all started on New Year's Eve. We had an atmospheric river and multiple waves. I don't even remember how many waves we had, but it was a number of them. And it was, pretty much for 10 days straight, we had quite a bit of rain. So the amount of rainfall and precipitation that we saw were of levels that we usually would get in a longer stretch of time period. So the rainfall for New Year's Eve, I think we had about 4.5, 5 inches of rain within 12 hours. That was that amount of volume, that flow was something that our systems were not made to handle. We usually get that much rain in a 72 to week time span. And so from that perspective, we just had quite a bit of water all at once and completely saturated a lot of conditions along many of the areas. Some of the more specific damage areas, Oak Avenue Park saw quite a bit. Pilarcitos Creek ended up getting a bottleneck with all the flow and some debris that was brought from upstream and clogged it. And so the trails, the park itself, on both sides of the park, on the driveway near Burger King, all of that was flooded in the immediate aftermath of the New Year's Eve rain events. And it did take a number of days for some of that water to dissipate. So we ended up receiving quite a bit of damage just from the flows, and not just the flows from the water, is the amount of silt and sediment that washed down Pilarcitos Creek. And as you can see in the pictures here at Oak Avenue Park, that's all sediment that came from the water. And once it receded, it deposited a good amount of that sediment. And we went out there today, and still in some areas it's saturated to the point where it's difficult to actually go and remove some of the debris and materials. You can kind of see there was some old washout of materials in the creek. It ended up we had some homeless encampments along the creek that had popped back up after earlier cleanup events and relocation efforts. And so that debris also was part of what flowed under downstream and caused some of the blockages. So we actually had, as far as property damage, this was the area that we had the most property damage. There were 5 structures that had stormwater intrusion into their garages and into some of the living spaces along Oak Avenue. And so this is an area that we've done some initial cleanup on the street level. We're still holding off until the conditions are a little bit better, drier, for us to go and remove more of the materials so that we can activate the site and get the trails back up and going. And speaking of the bike trail, this is the section of the trail that goes from Oak Park towards under the underpass, and then it goes into the Tom and Pete's property, and then kind of ends up in Main Street. And so you can see here again, we had a quite amount of silt and sediment. These pictures were taken after the initial stormwater. If I don't know if I have any pictures of it, but I definitely was keeping my eye on the USGS gauge that's under this bridge. The water level was pretty much at the bottom of this bridge deck. There was no space in between at some critical points of flow. Our biggest challenge here was we actually had folks that did not want to leave. And even as the water was climbing, Matthew Chittister, our city manager, actually went down there and begged them to, you need to leave. This is not safe. And luckily they came out and we were able to find them temporary housing and get them out of the storms, and also keep them safe and dry from the conditions that we're seeing here, because I think the next day the water level was at the bottom of the deck. So this one's a tricky one because it's actually within the Caltrans right of way. And so one thing that we are doing is working with Caltrans. There's a whole lot of areas that need attention. And I think the challenge is going to be getting to all these different areas. Some of the locations like this, where we will need collaboration with folks like Caltrans. In some areas, we may be working with the county. And so we're starting those conversations. And in the coming months, as those crews start mobilizing and coming in, we'll start undertaking more of these efforts. So it's unfortunately, I don't have a time frame quite yet, but we are just starting on the cost recovery of what we've expended to date, dealing with the initial floods. And now our focus turns into making not just the immediate repairs, but doing these types of maintenance efforts where we just need to clear sediment and sand. And again, the conditions have been so saturated still with a lot of flow still in the creek that it's still a challenge to do it. We may be waiting until the spring season to be able to do it, unless we end up getting no rain for the remainder of this wet season. So we'll see how it goes. We're coming up on February, but I feel that by April we should have the right conditions where we can go and activate these areas again. Here's another. As far as the coastal trail, this was a very significant portion that we saw of failure. This is the coastal trail, and it's adjacent to kind of the Myrtle Street. It's hard to kind of tell here, but so Myrtle is this little street in Alsace-Lorraine. And if you go straight out from Myrtle to the coastal trail, we have a drainage channel and then an inlet and culvert for a pipe outfall that goes underneath the trail itself. And so what had happened is with the damage to the bluff top from the wave action and the wind and all the saturation, we ended up getting areas that started infiltrating into the pipe and caused a joint fracture. So the joint of the pipe that you see exposed here, these are 20-foot segments. So the next joint, 20 feet in, actually the amount of water had been clogged with the amount of water that went through, and because of the volume that was continuing to come, it found its own path around it. So essentially, it was so saturated that the water started finding the cavities between the soil and the outer layer of the pipe. And that's when we started seeing this issue. We've been monitoring it very closely. You probably have seen that we've changed our barricades. We feel that if we get to a point where we have to close it and create a bypass, we will do that. But we are looking at what we need to do to address this failure. We have some ideas on how to deal with it, but it's a little complex. And again, the site conditions are too saturated to really do any meaningful work at this point. But we're going to continue monitoring it from a safety perspective, and we're looking at our alternatives on how we can repair this. So we can report back out with more information once we start looking at some of our alternatives. So what you can see here is, and I'll just mention it. So the middle picture is on the bluff side. So that is what discharges onto the bluff. This Myrtle bubble is interesting because the bluff kind of comes parallel. The opening kind of comes parallel, and so there's almost this ravine that goes between the two bluffs and then kind of goes sideways towards the north. So this is that section that's towards the beach. This pipe on the top right corner, this is the area that where I mentioned that the water found other means of flowing. So this was the head wall and inlet to that pipe that failed. So the water ended up finding its way behind the concrete. I mean, this concrete just started buckling at that point with some of the slope and soil stability issues. So this is what ultimately caused that damage on the tail end of the pipe. So look for us to do work in the springtime as soon as the weather allows us. Another area that we saw, again, with the New Year's Eve event was so significant because of not just the rainfall, but it also coincided with king tides. And so Pedestrian Creek is more of a floodplain than a creek itself, especially when you get to the tail end. The creek fans out and it turns into a coastal marsh. So when you have that hydraulic pressure from the waves on the other side, even if the creek was flowing at high capacity, at some point that was going to block and push it back. And that's what we ended up seeing in Pedestrian Creek. But with those king waves and the king tides and everything that we saw, they did a pounding on a lot of the coastal trail segments. Surfers Beach, although it's outside of our city limits, the trail itself, I think folks have seen it. I drive it every day coming into work and home, and there's significant sections missing. I think half of it in some sections have fallen in. On the Half Moon Bay side, given our elevation, we were a little bit more protected from the perspective of the tidal influence. But what we did see was some of the washout that occurs with those actions. This is what the Poplar Beach staircase looks like. And you can see on this left picture, you've got some areas where the concrete met the bluff, and we've starting to see some localized erosion. So these are some of the areas that we're going to look to repair. and we've done it in other projects. The Cañada Verde staircase we'll show next. But there's materials that we can use that we can utilize that can fill the void, provide that structural protection, and relatively quickly. So we're going to look at that and see what we need to do to resolve that issue. What I did like to see was the fact that the landing was still. So this was designed so that the bottom step of the concrete landing would be exposed at low when the sand is retreated with the tidal influence. So I'm happy to see that, not a huge drop off at the tail end. So from that perspective, I think it just shows that the elevation that of the high water mark that we chose was appropriate for this landing location. We also see there was also some just because of the overall amount of rainfall and stormwater, there was also some areas that you can see down the steps itself that has seen some localized erosion. Nothing major where we were concerned about having to close this access point down, but that'll be some of the areas. We'll be going back there and replenishing some of the materials that were washed out with the rains. Here's the Cañada Verde beach staircase. So what I was mentioning here is you can see very similar based on the wave action. We had some receding of the sand. And so you have some of these exposed areas. So in the picture in the middle, you can kind of see that lighter color grout between the older rock. So that was a city repair about 4 years ago. And what we did was there's a product that is a expansive foam that is non-toxic and does not wash off. So it's quick drying. So think of that material that you use to plug holes in your walls and your utility spaces, kind of in the can. So that they have that, but on the industrial level. And the materials that we utilize are faster drying and can be easily applied to in difficult places such as this. You don't need to bring major equipment down. There's some forming that they'll do, and then they basically with a hose and a pump, they will push this foam through, and it dries and takes that space and fills that void immediately. So that's the repair that we're looking at doing here and probably at Poplar Beach. But overall, not as much damage as what we saw at Surfers Beach. That one was hit pretty hard. And last but not least, I just wanted to mention, obviously Highway 92 took a beating with the rains. There were some pretty critical areas of damage. Folks were aware of the pothole that was forming on the westbound lane just south of the summit in 35. At this point, I think folks will probably are aware, but I'll just mention it. So at that point, they're still working on the permanent repair. However, they were able to fill the void, stop the erosion that was occurring at that time. And with the removal of the K-rail segments in the median, we're able to create 2 lanes temporarily. They don't have a median separating 2, so it's a lower speed limit that's currently in place in that location. So there will be some impacts as far as travel times due to that. But it's absolutely better than the previous condition, which was one way only or total closure. That was just not acceptable. And I have to give kudos to our communication team and our city manager for pushing Caltrans more so than I was able to get them to resolve that issue. And then last but not least was the sloughing off of the roadway on westbound at the reservoirs. So as of yesterday evening, we heard from Caltrans that they were able to stabilize this side and open both sides. Now, for the majority of the daytime travel, both lanes will be open. However, we have heard from Caltrans that they are doing more night work, especially in this segment. So when they do that, they will go back to the one-way traffic control. We don't know the specific hours yet, but as soon as we find that information out, we will share that with our communications team out to the general public. And I wanted to highlight this link that we have here, the quickmap.dot.ca.gov. This is a web-based map that Caltrans their traffic operations center updates in real time. It doesn't provide any information as far as travel times. It doesn't provide alternative routes, but what it will do is show you exactly at that moment what's closed, what's one way, what's open both ways, what if there's any impacts on any of the road segments. That this is a great tool for planning those types of trips, because I think a lot of folks, that was one of the main complaints that I heard from many people was Waze is telling me to come 92. Even my wife coming home from over the hill, she ended up getting that. And I'm like, no, it's closed. I know it's closed. Do not go that way. And so she ended up going north to Sharp Park Road. 84 is also an alternative. So anyways, all that to say, if there's any questions, if you're hearing different things in the community, this map is the latest and greatest from their traffic operations center in Oakland. And they do update that as they get updates from the crews in the field with any impacts. And it's not just 92, obviously this is district wide. So with that will wrap up my update on the storms and some of the damages and impacts that we've seen. And before I open up to questions, I'll just mention again that so this process, with the fact that it was declared a state emergency, and hopefully San Mateo County will also be included into the national emergency. But we're hoping to recover some of the expenses of time and materials that we had to use immediately during these storms, as well as getting some support in the repair efforts that we're going to be undertaking. As you can imagine, a lot of other jurisdictions are in very similar situations as us, some in worse situations than us. And so there's going to be a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of demand on the type of improvements and contractors that we're going to be looking for. And so we're going to continue pushing and working hard, doing things with our internal labor as we can, and trying to schedule contractors and lining up our work as soon as possible. But I do expect delays in contracting just because of the impact and how wide the impact was to the state. So with that, I will stop talking, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that extensive update, Maz. Are there any questions comments from the committee?
Is it safe to assume that our difficulties in getting crews and specialists to take care of these immediate damage repair needs, is that going to lengthen the time on the broken bridge down between Miramar and the coastal trail?
That's a good question. I have not had a chance to talk to the county about their Miramar Bridge repair. I know that we were still waiting. I know they were still waiting on the prefabricated metal bridge that they are bringing over.
Okay.
So I don't think that's going to be impacted, but I certainly will reach out to my county counterpart and see if we can get an update on that status. But I haven't heard anything that to say that it's been delayed, and I haven't heard about any damage that was done to the interim improvements. So that's the good news there.
Fingers crossed.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we're going on 2.5 years, almost 3 years with that bridge out. And it's terrifying to keep moving people up onto Highway 1. Yes, it's nice that we have the concrete barriers that protect people going on the detour, but I'm just concerned that somebody's going to get hurt or killed. So let's not lose sight of that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will definitely touch base with the county at my next opportunity, and you can expect an update from me on that project at the next meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Any other committee members have any?
Would you like me to leave the slides up, or should I close it out so we can see each other's faces?
I think we're okay. You could close it out. If we had to come back, we could share it. But yeah, are there any other questions, comments, concerns?
I don't have any raised hands, but I put the link up for anyone who's out there listening and wants to sign up for email news with the city.
Thank you for doing that, Sherry. Well, with that, we are moving on to director's announcements. Maz, that's you again.
Thank you, Chair White. So I have a few announcements. It's been a while since our last meeting. We did receive some federal funding. I'd like to just quick shout out to Jackie Spears. She was able to get the East Side Parallel Trail Segment 2. So from Frenchman's Creek, from Spindrift to Frenchman's Creek, we were able to get $2 million in the big omnibus federal budget that was approved by Congress. That is not everything we need for the full project, but it definitely gives us everything we need for design and some construction money. So that is going to be working its way through the Caltrans appropriation process, and I will provide more information on that when we get there. But essentially, this is the project to link the future Highway 1 North project, so that East Side Trail that ends at Spindrift, and then it would take it from there through Frenchman's Creek. So we would have a bridge component on this project, and then connect to the other side of Ruisseau Francais, which then ultimately will go to the other proposed trail that the city's finishing design on, and then link to the county trail that is currently under construction.
Yay!
Yes, thank you. It was great. It was great to get that one through. We are also still looking for funding as we speak for the rest of the project. But once we get the funding from Caltrans started, we can at least start our environmental review and design and community outreach, because those will take some time, and we definitely want to get those moving while we seek out the rest of the funds needed for construction. The other thing I wanted to mention was not related to the bike ped directly, but folks may have heard, we talked a little bit about, we had a moment of silence earlier, so I just wanted to share that we do have some events coming up for folks, for the community. So tomorrow, this Friday at 5 o'clock, there will be a candlelight vigil ceremony at 5 p.m. at Mac Dutra, which is across from City Hall. There is going to be some song and prayer. There's going to be interpretation, and it's an interfaith-based event, so no particular denomination. And then on Tuesday, there will be an interfaith community a memorial service in the Boys and Girls Club at 530 Kelly Avenue. This includes prayers and healing words from interfaith leaders. That starts at 4 p.m. And then following that, there will be a walk and candlelight processional down to the IDES Hall down on Main Street. And then at the Main Street at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, January 31st, there will also be a community gathering with dinner and community members and I believe some of our local politicians. So I wanted to just mention that it went out in our Half Moon Bay general email blast, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Sherry, and we'll get that information to you all. And I think that's it for the director updates, unless there's any other questions for me.
Are there any other questions? No, thanks for updating on the community events, Maz, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the families and friends who are affected. And that brings us to the end of the evening. So thank you everybody for attending, and we're off to a good start here in 2023. And I look forward to seeing everyone in person in the next meeting. What's the date of that next meeting? Just so we.
That is
March 5th, I think. What is that, Thursday? Is that the 5th?
Yep.
Okay, we'll see everybody.
March 5th.
We'll see everybody on March 5th. And with that, we're adjourned.
It's actually the 2nd, sorry.
March 2nd, March 2nd, everyone.
But more information, more information will be forthcoming on that meeting.
Yeah, along with the agenda and everything, which will be posted on the website, which Sherry put in the chat. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Maz.